What's going on, guys? Welcome to Tell Us About That, the ultimate podcast for all boxing fans. I'm your host, On Fire Aguaya, and I'm here to take you on a thrilling journey through the world of boxing. On today's show, we have two-division, two-time world champion, one of the best commentators in the sport of boxing today, a bare-knuckle participant, and a host of his own show right here on YouTube, Paulie TV. Paulie, the Magic Man, Malignaggi. Yo, man, welcome to the show, man. Tell us about that.
Thank you, man. Thank you. What's going on?
Not much, man. Appreciate you coming on the show, man. It's a
Of
lot of
course.
things happening in boxing. We thought we'd get your thoughts.
Let's do it, man.
And
Let's do
also
it.
and most importantly, I wanted to start this podcasting thing with you as my first interview, as my guest, because there's a lot of history, and I don't think that we're going to be able to touch
Yeah,
on everything like that today. But this is special for me.
yeah. Of course,
I really
fire.
appreciate the time, man. Thank you for showing up. Thank you
Well,
for coming on my show.
my pleasure, bro. My pleasure, brother.
So we believe that every knockout tells a tale, and every punch has a story behind it. To
Mhm.
your recollection, when was the first time you threw a punch? What was the story behind that?
Oh, I mean, I was probably fighting with my brother. I'm 2 years apart with my brother. As far as first punch, I probably, it's probably get into a fist fight with my brother. First fight I got into in school was in first grade, so I was 5, 6 years old. Um, so yeah, I mean that was every punch is a story. So I mean, the very first punch I probably don't remember because, like I said, I mean it was probably me and my brother knuckling around. But as far as the first fight I got into when I was in school, I was in first grade.
Right, right. So, Paulie, let's look at your career for a second. Your career spanned many years and 44 fights, not including your bare knuckle fight.
Hmm.
Out of 44 fights, only four of your opponents had losing records. And those four opponents happened by your eighth fight. After your eighth fight, all your opponents had winning records. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's funny because it's something that I think is important in the development of a fighter. You got to incrementally raise the level of opposition. You're not, and I was fortunate enough to have a very intelligent matchmaker early in my career, Johnny Boz, who I think was a boxing genius. And Boz really was the kind of guy you used to talk about. You can match any fighter and just get him wins. It's very bland. It's very vanilla. You just get him wins and that's it. But it takes a real matchmaker to develop him in a way where you raise the level of opposition so he keeps getting better and better without getting him beat. But at the same time, he needs to keep learning. He doesn't just stagnate or getting into bad habits because his level of opposition remains bad. I don't know that there'll ever be another Johnny Boz, man. I mean, Johnny was not scientific in very much anything else because Johnny was like a one of a kind savant, But for anybody that met him, but he was a character's character. But for boxing, he was just a boxing genius, and I think a lot of the credit for developing me into the fighter that I became was through Johnny. Because yes, I had a good amateur career. Yes, I had been learning and getting better every single day because I worked so hard in the gym and I loved being in the gym and training at the time of my life. But at the same time, you still need to incrementally increase the level of opposition the right way so that your fighter doesn't get beat, but at the same time, your fighter doesn't get overconfident being just guys that he's beating for the sake of beating.
Right. Speaking of going up, incrementing in your challenges, in your 17th fight, you fought an opponent who was 40-9, 40 wins
Mhm.
and 9 losses and 1 draw. You fought a guy in a 17th fight who had over 50 fights. What's
Yeah.
your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that was I think it was Rocky Martinez. And Rocky Martinez had I think he had been a world title challenger. If I remember correctly, he had lost to Philip Holliday for a world title shot, an IBF lightweight world title shot earlier in his career. But he was sort of a guy who that was his ceiling. Maybe a world title shot. He was never going to be a world champion. The ceiling was about there, and he had been a guy who had tested prospects. I remember what I remember about Martinez was that only Miguel Cotto had stopped him, and that was with a body shot. Otherwise, he had gone the distance to that point in his career. He was a durable guy. So again, a guy who Boz knew sort of the incremental step up in opposition. This is a guy who's going to get you rounds. He's short of world class, but at the same time, he tests you to see if you are on the level of being deserving to fight at world class level. You can't beat him. You're not really going to be able to compete at world class level. So it was important to get me an opponent like that. I mean, now at this point in my life, I understand these things, and that was the science behind getting Martinez. I didn't stop him. I went to the 10-round distance, but it was a good experience for me.
Many fighters come into this game and hope to win a world title, something you've done twice, and get the big fights. Looking at your record, Cotto, Hatton, Juan Diaz twice, Judah, Danny Garcia, Broner, all these were big fights in their own ways. Tell us about being involved in so many big name fights with these guys who are caliber.
Yeah, it's funny because there's a saying that says, "I'm here for a reason, not the season," right? I mean, so I was here for a reason, man. I wanted to be part of important fights. I wanted to be a part of important promotions. I didn't want to just kind of lackadaisically just move along in boxing. You see, sometimes you see that today in boxing, where fighters just kind of want to preserve their records. They're just kind of moving around and maybe just hoping that a big break comes their way. Otherwise, they won't really take a tough fight. And for me, it was one of those things where I was like, you know what? I don't want to ever wonder if I could have beat this guy or if I could have beat that guy. All these guys are in my generation. I want to see if I want to test myself against as many top fighters as possible, and luckily for me, the top fighters in my generation also were willing to engage against me and fight me. And, it allowed me to, fill up my record like a resume, right? I mean, it was a lot of championship level fighters on that resume, but and some won, some I won, some I beat, some I lost to. But nonetheless, each fight, like you said, each punch is an experience and a story. Each fight was an experience and a story because each one of those fights is a big fight. So it has its own promotion, it has its own build-up, it has everything that goes into it, and all those are kind of parts of my story now. That I can look back on and know that the process was enjoyable because even the build-ups at times were fun, they were crazy, but they each have their own story.
Man, we appreciate the ride, man. We followed your career, from Coney Island to Pennsylvania to Connecticut as much as we can, where we could. We really enjoyed it, and we really enjoyed supporting you, man. Thanks for the ride, man. We appreciate that.
No, of course, man. It's funny because when I try to talk about telling you about that, Fire, you were an intricate part of my early career as well. We interviewing me in the Hammerstein Ballroom for so many of those nights. Speaking of things that I wanted to accomplish, and speaking of my frustrations with all those hand injuries back then, and then linking into my first world championship. You kind of have it documented as far as sort of me telling the story of that moment. You know what I mean, and how I felt in the individual moments on the way up. And of course, Fire, that we even linked up training together even before the first Golden Gloves. You know what I mean? I watched Gotti Manfredi with you, bro. Gotti versus Manfredi was at your house, remember?
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot happening in boxing. Let's talk about some things real quick. I'll run you down some fights and you give me your thoughts and your ideas and your opinions of them. We recently had the undisputed Errol Spence against Serrano fight. What do you think about that outcome?
I was surprised. First off, I thought Errol was going to win the fight. So imagine how surprised a guy like me was that was picking Errol to win the fight. But nonetheless, I also think that I am a pretty firm believer in that. The naturally bigger guy, when guys are evenly matched, the naturally bigger guy has an advantage. But Crawford has been able to grow into the welterweight division. I think Spence probably made a mistake in making this fight marinate too long because he allowed Crawford to sort of grow comfortably into the welterweight division, become a full-blown welterweight puncher, physically strong, and really it showed on fight night. Crawford has more Crawford has, going into the fight, you could kind of see had more versatility. It's funny because I guess I covered myself going into the fight. I always was saying even before that fight that Crawford was my number one pound for pound because I thought he was just so versatile and such a multi-dimensional fighter. But I just felt Spence was just too big, too strong of a guy, and Bro was going to bring too much of an engine to the fight. Well, you know what? Crawford showed why he's number one pound for pound. He kind of doubled down on that, and also how he's a full-blown welterweight. And honestly, he was so good that when people talk about he might be able to fight Canelo, yeah, it does sound ridiculous, but it doesn't sound as ridiculous as it usually would. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how good he was in this welterweight fight. While before this, people were wondering if he was even good enough to be a natural welterweight, to beat such a powerful natural welterweight like Spence. So very, very shockingly good, extremely calculated, disciplined, skilled, amazing performance by Terrence Crawford.
Nice. Next few weeks after that, speaking of Canelo Alvarez, he defended his super middleweight titles against Canelo-Charlo. Give us your thoughts on that fight.
The thing with Canelo Alvarez is, you're a super fighter. You're the fighter, a generational fighter, the guy who sells the most in his generation. You have a responsibility to uphold a certain level of opponent, unfortunately and fortunately, because really, when you're a generational fighter, everybody wants to tune in and watch you and talk about you. You kind of represent the sport as a whole. But at the same time, you also kind of control in the palm of your hand the people's opinion of boxing for that generation, because most people, most of the casuals that only watch a handful of fights a year will only watch your fights. And in that regard, that responsibility up by Canelo is sometimes something that I think he takes a bit too lightly. He's had a phenomenal career, obviously done very well, but people kind of were complaining about Charlo before the fight because he's 2 weight classes below, and it was something that we were wondering, is it going to be good enough? Is it what's the point of fighting a guy 2 weight classes below when you've got a phenomenal guy like David Benavidez who's right underneath you and is deserving of a title shot and isn't getting it, and only in boxing can these things happen. People always complain about the fights not happening. Only in boxing these things happen, where you just keep letting it marinate, and things sometimes they don't happen at all. But with Charlo, eventually, just as in all big fights in boxing, we eventually get acclimated to the promotion, and we say, okay, we get excited anyway. We may have complained about it at first, but we get excited anyway. Well, Fight Night showed us why we were complaining to begin with. Jamel was too small. He knew he was too small, and he just showed up for a paycheck, showed up not to get hurt. He says, you know what, I'm going to pick up 20 million racks in this fight. I'm not going to go and not be able to enjoy these 20 million racks. I'm going to make sure I get my 20 million racks and fight in a safety first way so that I can enjoy my 20 million racks. Okay. More power to him, fair play to him. But at the same time, this isn't boxing. And at the same time, we all have a responsibility to allow the fighters behind us, the young kids behind us, the dreamers behind us, to dream of that future of becoming superstars, millionaires, top-level fighters, writing their legacy and history, all this other stuff in a fight where fans fill arenas. When you do this kind of thing, you hurt the brand of the sport, and you start to really leave it in an imbalance to the ability to be able to leave a trailblazer, a road for these young fighters to still be able to pay for themselves as well, because you don't do it. So it's about more than ourselves when we fight at that level. At that level, it's about continuing to pave the way for young dreamers who want to fight their way to a better life.
Makes sense. You mentioned David Benavidez. Do you think Demetrius Andrade has an opportunity to beat him?
I do. It's funny. Ironically, this is the 2 guys that Canelo avoided like the plague, and now they got to fight each other. Andrade, I thought years ago was really probably the best opponent Canelo was refusing to fight. I still don't think he's totally shot. I don't know. I can't tell you for sure what I think Andrade has left. He's still undefeated, but he's 35, 36 years old at this point. So he's not in his prime anymore. I was at his fight with William Williams. I felt like he got hit with a right hand in that fight. In a fight he won easily, but it felt like he got hit with a right hand that I felt hurt him. And Williams isn't the biggest puncher, but at the same time, it did hurt him. And I started to tell myself, Andrade is starting to get touched with things he wasn't getting touched with before, and there's a little bit of Roy Jones in Andrade in that he did a lot of things wrong, but he was so talented he got away with them. But as you get older, you start to pay for them a little bit more, and you don't age as gracefully. I don't know where he's at, honestly. He's still undefeated. He's still dominating. It's only a certain level of opponent can test him. Is that level of opposition David Benavidez? Can Andrade still compete at a level of fighting a guy like David Benavidez? You wanted Andrade to fight these kind of guys early in his career. Nobody fought him. Some part of that is his own fault for signing with teams that couldn't get him, couldn't connect him with those kind of fights. But at the same time, we're here now. You have to favor Benavidez because he's younger, he's more explosive at this point. But Andrade is no easy pickings, and Andrade is not just a guy who makes you look bad. Andrade is physical himself. Andrade has a bit of a bully in him, in a bullying streak in his own right. But I just tend to think that Benavidez, with his younger, fresher career, may have that explosiveness continuing as the fight wears on, while Andre starts to tend to fade at this point later in fights, and that could spell the difference maker.
This is a two-parter. Amanda Serrano is making history by going into 3-minute rounds. Also on the MVP announcements, you're on the card. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm commentating the fight, Amanda Serrano fight this Friday night. It's interesting because it's something that has been talked about a lot, women's equality in terms of getting paid in different sports and whatnot. And I believe that I believe that women's equality in sports comes from what they generate, right? Because money doesn't grow on trees. It has to be able to be generated ratings-wise, TV-wise, ticket sales-wise, all this other stuff. So I never really bought into the fact that equality, because we do the same thing as them. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. In the WTA, the tennis, the women don't play 5 sets, but yet they still get paid the same as the men. Why? Because they generate just as much money. The sponsors, the ticket sales, the sport is just as big, right? Even in the UFC, to a degree, which nobody gets paid great in the UFC, but the women have a pretty much equal stake if they are able to generate that kind of money. So I feel like if given the proper perspective, if given the proper platform, women will be able to generate money as well. We saw that with Serrano herself when she fought Katie Taylor in an amazing fight that had a packed Madison Square Garden, loud. I mean, you wouldn't have known if there was guys or girls fighting that night. And that's the way it really can be if you promote the women's game the right way, right? So it's just, you get in there and they give you a great fight. And that's sort of what Serrano has built up a reputation to do. Not only is she an excellent fighter, but she also is a fighter who gives you great fights. And of course, in this battle for equality, in this battle to try to continue to level up the playing field, one of those things was, well, they fight an extra minute less. They fight an extra minute less in the women's. Let's try to navigate that and even that up. And so let's see if we can still give those continuous, exciting fights that we've been giving. This is in the women's game, of course. And not a lot of them wanted to step up. Amanda Serrano stepped up. Now, this could go in one of two ways here. There's always pros and cons to every situation. And of course, what is always the saying? You never get a second chance to make a first impression. This fight right here is the first impression. And Serrano was telling us today that, she wanted Taylor as the opponent, but Taylor didn't want to do it. You know what I'm saying? So that first impression for the women, it could have been on a much bigger situation. This could have been the first 12 3-minute rounds for title fight for women's boxing. Could have been, if it would have been Serrano Taylor too. That's your Sports Illustrated moment. That's your Christy Martin get on the cover of Sports Illustrated moment. That's a landmark moment for women, and it would have been with two stellar fighters. But Taylor didn't want to step up, so she has had to. Serrano has had to try to find a different opponent, and she did that for this fight. It's still a decent level opponent, but nonetheless, I think it's more about Serrano than it is about the whole event as a whole, right? Where it could have been. But nonetheless, I think that I commend her for trying to continue to do that. It could go one of two ways here. Women's boxing in 2-minute rounds, there's less knockouts. So that third minute could produce more knockouts, right? If you start to do that consistently. But also that final minute, also from the other perspective, that final minute is also a protection as far as we've seen a lot of brain traumatic knockouts, just traumatic knockouts, traumatic brain injuries. That's what the phrase I'm looking for. Traumatic brain injuries with fights with the men that drag along, and that final minute is a big reason for it, right? A lot of those knockouts happen in the final third of the round. So you also may have some of that starting to happen in the women's division. But then you can argue back again. Well, some of the women are just so tough. A lot of women are just tough, and they're not as good talent-wise. So they're able to go the distance for 12 2-minute rounds, and isn't that worse? If they're going the distance for 12 2-minute rounds, if you just take them out, it's actually safer, because you just catching a beating for 12 2-minute rounds is probably worse for you, right? But then again, there's the other side. They're so tough that you're going to catch a beating for longer. So if they don't get knocked out, they could be getting hurt. So you see how this goes. This go back and forth. The only way you're really going to know is when you know. You get in the ring and you start to produce the results. You start to produce the excitement factor, and you start to produce opinions from those things. And that's sort of what we're going to be looking for this Friday night with the Serrano fight, and also going forward as well if women do this.
That's great. Devin Haney, Regis Prograis, December. Tell us about that.
I think Prograis has a little bit of trouble, guys, with guys who change range, guys who move around. I think that's what it showed us in his last fight. Prograis is an excellent fighter if you stand in front of him. You know what I mean? He sort of looks for that because he's more tactical and he's got the better technique for guys who stand in front of you. You know, but when he's got to go find you, it seems like he has an issue with his legs. And Haney has a long jab. Haney also has that ability to control distance well and fight at range. And also, Haney, I don't know if this is done on purpose, but it's advantageous to him nonetheless. He's coming off a fight against a southpaw with Lomachenko. So you're going back-to-back with southpaws. You're kind of flowing right in back-to-back with southpaws. So you're keeping yourself sharp. You're going back-to-back training camps with southpaws. So you could maybe expect Haney to be a little even more sharp than he was in the Lomachenko fight. The Lomachenko fight was a fight I thought he didn't win, but it was competitive nonetheless. And I think if he brings that kind of level to Prograis, who I don't rate as high as Lomachenko, but I rate still pretty high, I think it could be enough for him to come out with the victory. He's just, he's younger, he's fresher. Prograis, you're only as good as your last fight, right? That's the saying in boxing. So Prograis kind of suffering from that right now. People may be taking him lightly. People may be underestimating him. But at the same time, had he looked too good, maybe he wouldn't be getting this fight. Maybe Haney wouldn't be so apt to be wanting to challenge him for his world title. Nonetheless, I think it's a fight everybody can look forward to. It'll be a good fight. I slightly edge to Devin Haney for that one, though.
Tell us about the reports of Floyd Mayweather reportedly fighting on the same day as Devin Haney.
Yeah, that was an exhibition that they're talking about, actually. I'm hearing rumors that it's going to be Mikey Garcia. I'm hearing rumors that it could be the final Showtime pay-per-view, the final Showtime show of their history. As we know, Showtime Boxing is going out the door and exiting boxing, and so that could be the final show, and it will be sort of their swan song, their curtain call, so to speak. And that's a big show. Listen, I think Mayweather has done a lot of exhibitions lately, but only a certain level of opponent, right? If you're even going to do a Showtime pay-per-view, you need it to be against a certain level of opponent. And Mikey Garcia is also kind of a retired, semi-retired fighter who was world-class as well. So I think you have a pretty good show there. And I'm hearing that the pay-per-view undercard could feature fights that are rumored to be such as Keith Thurman against Stanionis, maybe Danny Garcia against Erislandy Lara. So they would be putting together a pretty good show there. My only issue is, why has it got to be on the same night as Haney and Prograis? First of all, Haney and Prograis has no business being on pay-per-view to begin with, right? But now you're putting us two pay-per-views the same night, and you're going to make it even more difficult. I don't think Haney's a pay-per-view guy. You know what I mean? I don't think he's going to generate that much. I think the Lomachenko fight only got you 150,000 pay-per-views, and that was against a more known opponent. I don't think Prograis is known as Lomachenko, so that's a risk. Now you got to go up against another pay-per-view, which is a Mayweather pay-per-view, which will sell no matter what, because Mayweather attracts all the casuals and attracts all the buys, right? So now you're risking even more. I mean, I don't know what kind of operation DAZN has been running there. I still don't understand how DAZN makes money. I mean, the fact that channel hasn't been investigated is beyond me. But that's in and of itself something else, man. They just piss money away and they just keep reinvesting it. Somebody keep reinserting the money in there. But I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to start blaming for money laundering operations, but at the same time, I mean, it does cross your mind when you just can't see how people are making money, though. But nonetheless, when it comes to Mayweather, it would be a Showtime pay-per-view. Devin Haney and Prograis would be a DAZN pay-per-view, it's a shame because I feel like Prograis and Haney is a really, really exciting fight. It's a boxing fans fight, right? So unfortunately, when it's just a boxing fans fight, like Haney Lomachenko was a boxing fans fight, right? So those are the ones we're gonna buy, but a lot of casuals aren't. And the numbers that of pay-per-views they sold sort of showed that. But I feel like this is another boxing fans fight, and so to give us Mayweather in an exhibition the same night, it's a bit frustrating because it's gonna kind of split the. It's going to become partisan and split it in different ways.
With Showtime out of the boxing game, does that mean more and more pay-per-views? And if so, where will the fans be watching?
I don't know, man. I don't know where. I know PBC has a big contract with a lot of fighters, so there's got to be a home that's got to be found. I don't know. I'm hearing something like Amazon Prime, but then I heard Amazon Prime wasn't willing to invest into the big fights. It might be like medium range fights, sort of like the level of fights that were the old Friday night fights, the level of fights that were used to be on Fox Sports 1 on or PBC, and the level of fights that I work with at Pro Box TV, sort of that level of fights, of course, to raise the level of, to be able to match the level of excitement that Pro Box TV brings you, that's going to be tough, because we bring you fights that are right below the world-class level, but we matched all those guys against one another, man. And so we consistently have had really, really good shows on Pro Box TV. I don't know that if you want to end up competing against something like that, because as a promoter, you have a reason to make certain guys win. While at Pro Box TV, we just throw them all in with each other, and whatever mishmash it gets, and turns to be a really exciting mishmash. So it's very hard to keep fights at that level while also making sure you're trying to get certain fighters ahead, because they're the matchups and the excitement factor of the matchups, it hurts. That ends up being hurt. The value ends up being hurt. As far as Showtime is concerned, I mean, listen, it was a good run. They had a lot of years there. I was thankful even for the years I got there as well. But you sort of write your own your own will here. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they sort of left a lot to be desired of late. They're having a decent year this year, but at the same time, you can only go so far as you keep doing that before eventually the plug gets pulled. HBO did that, and now Showtime's doing that. Hopefully, boxing continues to land on its feet and winds up in places where people have access to it and can watch it, even casuals. Because I think the more it keeps moving on to such certain platforms, the less opportunity casuals have to watch these fights. Now they're only about what they hear about it, and now you can't just stumble into a fight and get curious and watch it. That's the only thing issue there. Boxing is going to continue to become niche and get even more niche under the current television market that's being created, which are just apps.
Saturday night, the heavyweights are in action. Tyson Fury, Francis Ngannou. Does Ngannou have a chance?
No, I don't think he's got a chance. I think the sell is that he's a big puncher and that he's got a chance. I think that's how you sell pay-per-views. I remember we had to do that with Mayweather McGregor. Even though we knew there was no shot the guy would win, we had to sort of sell you the fact that, the guy can punch, and maybe if he lands a shot, and all that good stuff. I think it's going to be the same thing here. Heavyweight boxing is even more applicable in that regard, in that kind of conversation. Oh, he can punch. But I think Fury takes a page out of the second fight with Deontay Wilder. When you back up punchers, they're not as hard of hitters. Ngannou may be a little bit awkward coming from another sport, so Fury may not take any chances. He may just kind of walk him forward, and Fury's a big guy, so he can walk you down and he can bully you around, and he's even bigger than Ngannou, as big as Ngannou is. And so I think when you back up the puncher, he's no longer effective. We've seen that with certain guys. We've seen that with Deontay Wilder. We've seen that with Mike Tyson. We've seen that in history and everything. It's kind of tends to be a thing, and I think Fury has the body style, the body frame to back up Ngannou. He has the body frame to even box Ngannou, but I don't think he's going to take a chance. Personally, my opinion, and it's obviously Tyson Fury, he's like a box of chocolates. You just don't know what you're going to get. And he can decide at any given point anything. But just like this fight, I mean, he gave us this fight, but then he's also talking about fighting Usyk, something we didn't think was going to be possible, So Fury, in that regard, I'm just guessing. I think he's going to come forward and try to maul Ngannou the way he did and make him completely ineffective as a puncher and take him out.
Paulie, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your knowledge, your opinions. Thank you for your time, man. Is there anything you want to tell my viewers that they should be looking out for? Anything you got happening?
Not really. I mean, I started my own little page. It's Paulie TV on YouTube. It's Paulie.tv on YouTube, and then I work with Pro Box TV. That's my employer now, and we got some great fights. It's an all-encompassing boxing channel. We do podcasts and daily talk shows. We have written news as well, where people can read up on articles, just like they did at the old fight news and the old boxing scene or the old boxing talk. And then we also have.
You say we. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You say we. It's Chris Algieri and Kenny Porter, right? And
yeah, we have Chris Algieri, we have Sean Porter, we have Tim Bradley involved, we have Teddy Atlas, we're all there. Mike Goldberg does a play-by-play with us. We also have Spanish, Pro Box TV Español, which includes Juan Manuel Marquez and Travieso Arce and Marco Antonio Barrera. So we've got the connection to both sets of boxing fans, the Hispanic market and the English market. And I think it's just a matter of people knowing we exist. Because if you get once you check out Pro Box TV, it's really, really something all-encompassing encompassing with boxing. And even our Wednesday Night Fight series, which is every 2 Wednesdays all year round, is sort of a replacement for the old Friday Night Fights. And I think it's of that level and maybe even better. I mean, we've given some really good fights this year on Wednesday Night Fights, and we cover all things boxing. When there's a big fight, I think we're your one-stop shop as far as coming over to us. We get a lot. We're starting to get a lot of interviews with the top fighters because they're starting to realize we're on the scene. And so talking about their fights and covering their fights and having opinion shows on their fights. We do preview shows. We do post-fight shows where we give our opinion on the happenings and what happened with the fight. We have a rumor mill. We have just daily news every day. So it's really, really terrific. And I think we're going to really grow. And I think if boxing fans are looking for that all-encompassing home for all things boxing, and have been frustrated with channels coming in and out, ProBox TV can really be your stop and one-stop shop there.
You heard it here first. ProBox TV, Paulie.tv on YouTube. The Magic Man, Paulie Malignaggi. Thank you for your time, my friend. We really, really appreciate it.